As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm gonna roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road, let's camera action.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is indeed your home for community radio. And our community is not just here in broadcasting out of the Connecticut area, but actually it's worldwide. And we're going to talk about sickle cell disease in adolescents and young adults, and that afflicts people throughout the world. And we're really kind of honored and pleased and blessed to have Dr. Cece Calhoun on the air today with us, Reverend Dr. Leroy Perry, and Reverend Elvin Clayton. Dr. Calhoun is new to New Haven. She was here previously for a fellowship, but she now is the assistant professor of medicine, hematology, and assistant professor of pediatrics here at the Yale Medical School. And she also holds a variety of degrees in addition to being a doctor. She has a master's in public health and an MBA. Dr. Calhoun, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to there's so much I want to talk about, so I'm not going to belabor your resume. I'll have people just look at the link later, but it is so important. So they may want to know if you're a Detroit Piston fan, or they may want to know if you're a Detroit Lion fan, or they may want to know what's Washington State's all about. But that's another issue. This issue we're talking about today is just so important in terms of adolescence and health. And if I could just digress for a moment, Reverend Perry sent me some information about a good friend of ours who's passed away. And I was in touch with another person today who's had 3 strokes, Dr. Calhoun, and mentioned that the blood thinners that he was taking were not effective. And I reference that to say that this take ownership of your health is so important. And every show that we do is, in fact, a life and death show. It affects people from cradle to grave. So let's jump in. I don't want to be nostalgic or somber, but I just wanted to kind of share with folks how serious I believe what we're about, what we try to do on the show, and how serious the participants are and our guests. Dr. Calhoun, in terms of sickle cell, you've done a great work, significant work in the areas of hematology and pediatrics, and as it relates to sickle cell disease. But there's so much rumor and discussion and falsehoods and just fear about what does that mean. So tell us a little bit about the disease, but also what are some of the health problems that are caused by sickle cell disease. So even if you go 5, 6, 7 minutes in terms of the intro, that's fine. We can pretend that you're at a grand round, but it's so important to kind of set the stage to get the facts straight. And I might even, in the course of our next 45 minutes or so, come back to some things you've talked about and even ask you to elaborate. So talk to us about sickle cell, hematology, pediatrics, but how that relates to sickle cell disease, and just paint the picture for us, and also the health problems that are caused by it.
Absolutely. So I am a Detroit Lions fan because I'm not a hometown hater, and I went to many of those degrees. One of them came from the University of Michigan. So I am a University of Michigan fan through and through. But I, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think this is one of the most important things I do, is talking to people in our community, because really my job as a doctor, as a hematologist, is to give people what they need to take to manage their care, to care for themselves, like you just mentioned. So if I'm doing my job well, that is the point. So I really appreciate this space. So sickle cell disease, it's an inherited blood disorder. You're not going to catch it like from hugging somebody. So it's something that persons are born with. And what it does is it results in a different shape of your red blood cell. And so I always talk to friends and colleagues about, if you imagine that your normal red blood cell is like a jelly donut, it's round, squishy, carries oxygen to the different parts of your body that needs it. When you inherit 2 copies of the sickle cell gene, because it's passed as an autosomal recessive trait, dominant trait, what happens is instead of having those squishy red blood cells, your red blood cells are shaped different, like a sickle, which is where it comes from, or a banana or something like that. In addition to being misshapen, they also don't hold on to oxygen well, and they're very fragile, brittle, and sticky. And so if you think about your blood vessels as pipes, you have those nice squishy cells kind of flowing through, bouncing off the side of the walls, doing their job, taking oxygen through your lungs, through your heart, through your brain, through your tissues and muscles. And you replace those with cells that are deformed, that are sticky, that are sticking to each other, that are going through those pipes, scratching up the sides of the walls, not really getting oxygen to where it needs to be. You can think about physiologically how that might affect the human body. And so you might be like, well, why do we have sickle cells? Like, why would our body do this? And it's an evolutionary trait. It actually protects against malaria. So any place in the world where malaria is endemic, so sub-Saharan Africa, India, Arab populations, our body created this evolutionary mechanism to protect us. But we know because of slavery, that trait persisted as Africans were on the diaspora. So whether it is in the United States, whether it's in like Brazil or other countries, sickle cell is really, really prevalent. When most people I know think about sickle cell disease, they think about pain, because that is one of the things that patients experience and feel the most, is one of the things that affects their quality of life the most. While we see them in the acute setting, so the unplanned setting, is because of pain. And one of the things that we really try to help support them through and manage them through as they strive to live longer lives. The life expectancy for sickle cell is actually 20 years less than same like African-American person, same socioeconomic status, everything else being the same. If you have sickle cell, your life expectancy is decreased by 2 decades, and that's unacceptable. And so a lot of the work that the hematologic community does, but also really, really sickle cell warriors who are strong advocates for themselves, is figuring out what do we need to do to help persons with sickle cell live long and not just survive, also thrive. And that's my job. That's what I hope to do. Some of the community members know I have a particular heart for adolescents and young adults with sickle cell, like we're talking about today, because it's a super high risk time for them for so many reasons. Life is changing all around them, and their disease is also changing. And so I think supporting them in that space is absolutely critical. But it's a partnership, like most good things in life. It's not just the doctor telling the patient what to do, or even the patient only managing themselves. It's us creating a community around them and supporting them through, whether it is novel medical therapies, whether it's through screening to make sure we prevent complications, whether it's through regular visits to manage complications that we know exist with the things that we have. It's really a collective effort.
Is it important to know that, and that's really helpful in terms of the context, and I'm going to probably circle back for a few things, but is it important to know the numbers of whether, you mentioned that anywhere in the world, folks can kind of be subject to this from an inheritance standpoint, but we always hear about, well, only Black people and not white people, and there's this era of misinformation just troubles me so much. So just speak a little bit about that delineation of the demographics.
Absolutely. So worldwide, it's the most common monogenetic disorder. So there are tens of thousands of people with sickle cell in the world. Excuse me, hundreds of thousands, my bad. In the United States, the latest population estimates say about 100,000 Americans. But when that data was published, it was already known that was going to be increasing in incidence, and that's only the patients that we were able to capture. So it's probably plenty more. And it is 1 in every 365 African-American births. But like we talked about, it's an evolutionary trait, right? So anywhere that people came from on the diaspora of any culture can have people who are affected by sickle cell disease. And especially like African-Americans, we are like a homogenous race. We have so many different, everybody's doing 23andMe these days. We have so many different ethnicities within ourselves that, you know, you cannot look at somebody and say, oh no, you don't have sickle cell, or you couldn't have sickle cell. So yeah.
Let me bring in quickly Reverend Dr. Perry and Reverend Clayton. Reverend Clayton, I won't ask you why you don't have a doctor beside your name, but that's a different story. But you know, politics is so much. But Reverend Clayton, let me start with you, and then Reverend Odinga Perry. Love to have your comments as well. Just about the general issue of advocacy and I'll say it, commune sharing is a phrase I kind of like to use, and you know, just why that's important to for everyone to be involved and to have this knowledge and to take ownership of their health.
I think that without the facts, you don't really know where you're going without that information. So we just got some books in the other day. One is called Blacks in Medicine by Richard Allen Williams, which is an awesome book. And he talks about the 300,000 babies born each year with sickle cell. He said they come from Nigeria, the Republic of the Congo, India, Sub-Sahara Africa, and the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And he says, like Dr. Calhoun has said, about 100,000 in our area, in the United States. But I would say that she said 1 out of every 365 Black or African-American births. Here's the point: only 1 in 4 patients in the United States with sickle cell disease receive the standard of care described in the current guidelines. And I think that's an important notation that we have to make. And I think the other thing that we have to look at is not only the trait, but the disease. So there are people who have the trait, but may not have necessary disease. And I think that in our community, we have to find a way of helping people discover that they have the trait and what they can do, how they can get the standard of care if they have the disease. And so this show is important because all of our listeners, I'm hoping, will be asking these questions. Where do we go?
Indeed.
How do we find this out? Do we find that? Do our parents know at birth? We had a person on the show the other day say he didn't know until he was half grown that he had the trait. So how do we fix this abnormality with regards to our understanding of who is and who is not a carrier without any stigma being related to it? It is what it is. It was really something to protect us, so it ought to be a good thing. And yet, you know, once we got to these shores, something changed. Anyway.
Obviously, I'm going to ask Dr. Calhoun to delineate the difference between sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait. But Reverend Clayton, would you like to share anything as well?
Tom, you want to repeat that question?
Just wondered if you, in terms of, as Leroy had kind of mentioned, the need for advocacy and I'm calling it information communion, and just being really aggressive to share with folks in every way that we can, in the supermarket, in the school, in the church, in your home, in your club, just about taking ownership of your health, particularly from the sickle cell standpoint. But given your role as a cultural ambassador, I was just curious if there's some advocacy passion that you still had for this issue.
Oh. Awareness and accuracy is vital. It's vital especially for this disease. And the more information that people like Dr. Calhoun and the ambassadors can share will help not only the patients, but it will also bring some relief to the family members. There's something that we say in church every now and then, that you may not look like what you're going through. And people with sickle cell disease don't look like what their inner body is experiencing. So when they arrive at the ER, they may have trouble getting the treatment that they need. So it's vital that we keep pushing the information and you asked the question about taking ownership of their health. Health, care, and people who are dealing with people with the sickle cell disease, they must know that this disease is real. Because what I've been told and what I've experienced from friends, that when a sickle cell patient goes to the hospital, they are treated differently, or they have to wait longer before they receive the pain medicine that is necessary. And we must also encourage the patient themselves to be a part of something like my chart or something equivalent, so that their lives will be better, and their visit to the hospital may be an improvement of what they're receiving now.
Indeed. Dr. Calhoun, Reverend Clayton, by innuendo, as well as Reverend Perry, directly talked about the disease versus the trait. Kind of share it, delineate that, and clarify that, because again, it gets so confusing. And I just have so much respect for you and your folks in the medical profession, because we consumers, we're lazy to take in information. We don't remember it. We got to be reminded. You got to be reminded to take our aspirin every day. So the difference between the trait and the disease.
We spend a lot of time studying this stuff, so we ought to know. But so when we think about inheritance patterns, or how do you get sickle cell disease? How are you born with it? I always go back to those sixth grade biology Punnett squares, where you're trying to figure out, okay, is it recessive? Is it dominant? And so that's where this trait piece comes in. So in order to have sickle cell disease, you have to have 2 copies of this kind of genetic trait. One from your mom, one from your dad. But when we think about normal hemoglobin, that's represented by an A. If it's a sickled hemoglobin, it's represented by an S. But you can have trait, which is just a combination of both, one A and one S. And what does that mean clinically? It means you're going to live a full, healthy life, and you're not going to notice anything. Maybe if your body is under a lot of stress, like high altitudes, or you're playing Division I college sports at the University of Michigan, go Blue, then you may find that, hey, you might notice some blood in your urine or something like that. But when it's time for you to have a baby, when you procreate with somebody else, if that person has sickle cell trait, then there's a 50% chance that baby could have sickle cell disease. If they have sickle cell disease, then it's a 75% chance that child will be born with.
So say that again. Say that again.
Yeah, I usually am drawing a picture right now, if that really helps. But so if you have sickle cell trait, so your kind of like blood formation would be represented by an A and an S. A normal would be an A and an A. Somebody with sickle cell disease may have SS or SC, or there are many types. If you marry and you have a baby with somebody with sickle cell trait, both of you just have one normal, one gene, one sickle gene, there's a 50% chance that your child could be born with sickle cell disease. If you have a baby with somebody who has sickle cell disease and you have sickle cell trait, there's a 75% chance that your child could be born with sickle cell disease.
I have a relative, actually a nephew, who's about to become a father, and it just occurs to me that there's so many things to be aware of with fatherhood and starting a family. But my mind goes to, should he, for example, get tested for the sickle cell trait? Should people get tested? Because we have these vaccines, we have COVID. People really adopting strange behaviors, as far as I'm concerned, about the need to protect their health. But specifically, should people get tested for the sickle cell trait?
Absolutely. So, sorry, I was just wanting to make sure I didn't misspeak. Sorry, I was just writing out my Punnett square just to make sure I didn't misspeak, because I want to clarify that before we move forward.
All right.
Yes. Okay, I misspoke. So if you have trait, 2 people with trait are together, there's a 50% chance that they will have trait, 25% chance they will have disease. somebody with sickle cell disease and trait, 50% chance
50%.
that their child. That's an important clarification. Sorry, I hate to
No. That's very,
do that,
very
but
cool.
it's very, very important,
Right.
and I don't want to speak because I was like, that was right. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to draw it out myself. Now, in terms of getting trait tested, so in the past 30, 35 or so years, we've had the newborn screen. And so when babies are born, their heel gets pricked and they send that blood drop off to test for a variety of inherited blood disorders. And sickle cell is one of those things. And if that comes back negative, like they see anything besides just regular A hemoglobin, then you will get a letter that says, hey, your newborn screen came back, and your pediatrician can help you figure out if your baby has any issues.
Yes.
But one thing I was talking to the ambassadors about is, these are babies, and then who in 18 years their parents are going to be like, oh yeah, by the way, when you were first born, I forgot to mention that you had one A and one S. And, you know what I'm saying? Like nobody's going to remember that necessarily. That's so many, especially if you're living a normal, full, healthy life and you're not having any complications. And so if you want to be thoughtful when you're kind of when you're ready to have kids and things like that, it's always value in having that knowledge, right?
Yes.
That's why we're here in this space, right? To make sure that we have the knowledge that we need to be successful. So there's absolutely value in moving forward with trait testing. And that's something that, your doctor can either send you to a hematologist for, or it's pretty straightforward. I'm not sure about whether or not Connecticut has available trait testing pretty easily, and I'll definitely look into that and follow up with you.
All right, good.
But it's super straightforward. It's really just a blood test. It's not anything invasive or anything like that. So
excellent. Share with us about medical advances. I've had the pleasure of through the shows of just hearing about so much. You guys are scientists and research. Well, not every physician is a scientist and researcher, but the intersectionality between research and medicine and science. It's just remarkable. I just hope that I can stay alive for another 50 years to kind of benefit from all these things coming down the pike. But have there been any medical advances in terms of the treatment and care for sickle cell patients? And either are there more options today than there were in the past? And how can we combat some of those challenges of not taking advantage of the medical advances that are available?
So I feel particularly lucky to be in hematology and working with sickle cell patients in this time, because in terms of scientific discovery, there had been a lag, a big lag, but recently there is renewed curiosity that is on top of that sustained interest from healthcare providers to want new treatment. So in many ways, like whether or not you're in a research lab or you do clinical research, or if you're a clinician, like, physicians are always pressing and looking for new things and trying to figure out how we can do the best care. So in many ways, we all kind of are some kind of researcher.
Indeed.
But I think certainly in the past few years, there has been increased interest in production, productivity in terms of the research space. And so I think about it in a few ways. I think about it in medications that are to address sickle cell disease directly, like in terms of trying to prevent that jelly donut cell from turning into a sickle cell. There are medications that try to address the complications of sickle cell disease, like pain. And then there's also advances that try to look at a cure to find a cure for sickle cell disease. So in the clinical space, for decades, the main disease modifying, that's how we describe drugs that address the sickle cell directly. Disease modifying medication have been hydroxyurea, which helps you make big fat juicy cells. Basically, that's how one of the mechanisms that we know how it works. And that had been used for a while, and it is standard of care. So Reverend Prairie mentioned earlier, receiving standard of care. And part of that is hydroxyurea. And for sickle cell patients of a certain type, all patients should be offered that and on that, because we know it prolongs life. And that is the one medication that we have proven evidence that it will add years to your life. But also nowadays we have medications like Oxbryta, which is a new medication that comes out that's a disease modifying medication designed to really increase hemoglobin. We have medications to address pain, like an infusion called crisanilizumab. We call it Adecveo because that's a whole lot to say, or Chris because it's a whole lot to say.
Okay, show off. Go ahead, show off.
Well, listen.
Go ahead, say it.
Listen, I was like,
I know Reverend Perry will define these terms for us. I'm sure, given his.
But they're just like brand names. I mean, like they're just names that drug companies have used. And there are a few medications coming down the pipeline. So that's one of the things that's exciting to me, selfishly, about working with the clinical ambassadors is as we open up trials for things that are going to benefit patients, that we can engage sickle cell patients early on, like not have to wait like until it's on market. We can get it to them early so that they can be a part of these clinical trials and studies that give them access to medications before they hit the mainstream. So I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about in this space. And then also, sickle cell disease is one of the diseases that's kind of top of mind when people talk about like gene editing and gene therapy, because right now the only cure for sickle cell disease is a bone marrow transplant. But it's really challenging to find matches, and it's not the easiest process. When you do have a good match, it's amazing. But sometimes there are benefits and risks to every intervention. So having another option at a cure is tremendous, and that's what gene therapy and gene editing offers. So,
and that's tremendous. And some of the treatment options that you mentioned, are they generally available here in the New Haven area?
So certainly medications that are on the market, Oxbryta, Chris, hydroxyurea, definitely, transfusions, absolutely. And the other thing is as patients continue to express interest to their physicians here, it gives us great momentum to advocate to be a part of these clinical trials, which certainly Yale New Haven Health System is excited about doing and wanting to do for patients here.
That's tremendous. Was that one of the, you've traveled from the Midwest to the West Coast, and you're here at the School of Organization and School of Management for a while. What was the attraction? Does Yale really have that name? And what attracted you to come back and share your expertise with us? I mean, we're just blessed in this little old town to have people with your expertise and talent.
Well, I'm blessed. And just on a personal, for me, like in my career, having the opportunity to collaborate with great people, dynamic leaders, committed leaders who are purpose-driven and having mentorship has been so important to me. And I think that it's nice that Yale has a great name. That's really wonderful. But I think part of it was, for me, a huge, huge part was the opportunity to grow, explore, ask questions about sickle cell disease that are important to me, and continue to have great mentorship. There are wonderful, committed people at this university, in the School of Medicine, at the School of Management, and at the hospital that that was the attraction for me, really. And, because I talked earlier about our responsibility as physicians to support patients, to wrap around them, but we have to do that as a collective. And so you want to have a critical mass of people who are really kind of in line with that vision, want to do the best for the patients here. And then I met the ambassadors and I was like, what? Y'all been holding out? So I think to have an already established collaboration with the community like that is really, really, really unprecedented. And it shouldn't be taken for granted. So the fact that I'm brand new and I'm already being able to connect with you and talk to people, I think that's a testament to how important the institution sees its relationship with the community and how it wants to provide care. So.
Well, indeed, a hearty welcome to you. As you may have encountered from the ambassadors, they're nice folks, but sometimes they can be critical and as well. So Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, I just wondered and truly, when I say that we know that you're pastors, but that's also not all, well, you guys are pastors and servants of the community. Let me just say it. I mean, that's my bias. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. But what are some of your concerns when it comes to treatment options in sickle cell disease? You've alluded to it a little bit, but I guess this is important for us to kind of paint the breadth of the pros and the cons and what the near term and the future might look like in terms of success for all of us. So I just wondered if you had any concerns at all when it comes to treatment options pertaining to sickle cell disease.
Well, see, Tom, I think that one of our main interests is social determinants to health, equity, inclusion, and treatment. For example, research on genetic disorders such as cystic fibrosis, which mainly affects white people, has clearly outpaced research with regards to sickle cell, which basically deals with African Americans or Black people. So sickle cell disease, which is 3 times more prevalent than cystic fibrosis, 100,000 to 30,000, receives much less funding support from the NIH and other foundations. So what Dr. Calhoun is for us, I'm hoping that in addition to treatment and patient care, that one of our advocacies will be how do we help fund this research? How do we bring it closer to the people who need it in our area and across the country? And so our job as ambassadors is also to be watchdogs to make sure that this doesn't get just swept to the side because it is, quote, a Black disease. It is a disease that affects more Americans than probably cystic fibrosis, and yet it doesn't get the same attention. So there's something wrong right there. So equity is an important part of what we do. And so being on this show and being able to get the word out and to blast it out. And also let me say that Yale has also, with Dean Nancy Brown, said that this is going to be our battle cry going forward, that we would look at social determinants of health. When we're doing medicine, when we're thinking about medicine, we have to think about the community and the people that are affected in that community. So I'm happy for the show. And Dr. Calhoun, you should have wore your gold, but you know what I'm talking about. We're happy to be with us.
I can go get them. Listen.
Reverend Clayton?
Yes, Tom. As pastors and servants of the community, we do have concerns. Pastor Perry talked about the social determinants, but it's sickle cell is personal. I shared with some of us the other day that one of my members who died at 37 years old just last week, complications from sickle cell. And one of the issues that he was faced with so often is that when he would go to the hospital, he would have to wait so long to get the pain medicine that he needed. And he would tell them what type of medications that suited him best. And he was treated as though he was a drug addict. So we have to get the message out to help not only the medical field understand the importance of listening to the patient, but the community at large, but there's so many people who don't understand about this disease that at this time there may not be a cure, that there's not a cure for it. So we need to just keep preaching it and sharing it so that these people who are suffering with it, and the other issue that he had, the cost factor, even with insurances, the copay at times was beyond his pocketbook. So if we could work out means that these people can get financial aid to help pay for the meds, even with insurance, that is something that as a pastor, as a community leader, I would love to see.
Well, needed, absolutely. Dr. Calhoun, rumor has it, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the director of the Adolescent Young Adult Sickle Cell Program. I mean, is that new? Is that novel? Is it, if not earth-shattering, is it significant? I mean, to me, it's super important. Unpack that a little bit about why your responsibilities in that regard and how it kind of relates to, as you mentioned, young people living people living longer. I mean, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but director of the adolescent young adult, because we often forget about our young people, for unfortunately. But
So
Mhm.
no, absolutely. So I think it's one of the most pivotal times in sickle cell disease in terms of changing outcomes. I'm obviously biased, right? It's something I have a unique interest in, but what the data will show us is that our adolescents and young adults are the ones who interface with the healthcare system the most, but maybe not necessarily in a way that's helpful, right? So they're the ones that use the ED or are getting admitted to the hospital for the longest time. They're the ones that maybe are not as connected to a hematologic provider or a subspecialty provider. We know that when we think about complications of sickle cell disease and morbidity and mortality, that's when the rate starts to rise right around that adolescent and young adulthood time point. And then you think about, too, just being a child with chronic disease. It's not just sickle cell patients that are struggling when they're going from pediatric to adult care. There are other disease processes like SIA. How do they continue to get care across the spectrum? People with congenital heart disease or who have had transplants. I think one of the unique things about the sickle cell disease population is something that Reverend Perry alluded to earlier, which is the complexity of the environment that they're in outside of the hospital when we think about equity and social determinants. And what Reverend Clayton said earlier about how they interface with the healthcare system that may have them be shrouded with stigma, not because they did anything wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when I think about transition clinic or developing programs to support them, it's multi-layer and it's complex, but it's absolutely critical because the support that we give our young people determines how they are able to succeed in adult life. And that's not just like, we have to think about that in every way, in education, fiscally, how we support them in their vocations and what they want to do career-wise, and absolutely, and most importantly to me, their health, right? So that they can be present in all those other spaces and succeed. And so that looks like preparing them when they're young, when they're like 12, 13, 14, having these conversations with them, their parents, whoever the support system is in their life, coaching them through those years, through those middle school years, through those high school years, helping them understand what's going on with their body, giving them the knowledge like we have come to. It's been a recurring theme in this show today about taking care and ownership of your own health, right? And if that's important for adults, how much more important for a child with a chronic disease, a teenager who says, I want to go off to college. I want to be away from home, but I got to feel confident I'm going to be able to manage my sickle cell so I can, go be fully present in my classes and live and enjoy life. Or, people who are here who say, well, I don't have that much family support, but I'm driven and determined. How can we help them be in a position that they need to be successful in life and whatever they choose? And so I think that it is incumbent upon the healthcare system to really, really support our young adults, but it's not going to be successful without the community, without all the considerations that my colleagues on this call have mentioned. So for me, it's nice to have that title. It's great. That's awesome. But I think the more important thing is designing a sustainable infrastructure around our young people that can ensure that they're successful and that they continue to survive and thrive.
Reverend Clayton, Reverend Perry, before I come to you, but I just wanted to ask Dr. Calhoun, throw in or the issue of mental health in terms of the mix that you just alluded to. I think sometimes we forget about the impact of that.
So I think it's like a underlying current that, it seems it's something that is in the background of all the things that we do, not just patients with sickle cell disease. Like we all are, listen, Reverend Clayton and Paul and Perry can probably speak to this more than me as they are spiritual leaders. Like they really know, keeping someone grounded and centered and how important that is. I think with sickle cell patients, one of the distinguishing things is that oftentimes these are kids who have chronic pain, right? And so they want to be normal, right? They want to do the things that their friends and colleagues are doing, but they have challenges. They have to know, okay, well, if I am dehydrated, that's going to trigger my pain. So I got to make sure I'm really thoughtful about this stuff. Or I want to go swimming, but as soon as I get out of the pool, if I'm too cold, then that might trigger my pain. So I got to make sure I have these things in place. Or, have been missing school because they've been admitted to the hospital for pain, right? So they have had a very unique life experience that affects kind of how they view the world. And I think being a child with chronic disease or a young person with chronic pain can shape the way that you navigate this world. And then I think you think about it, is these are young Black kids trying to navigate this
Yes.
world, and what that means for them in this society, what that means for all of us as Black people trying to be successful. I think in the past year or two has shown a light, but these are not new issues.
Indeed.
And so I think first being able to acknowledge that it's okay to not feel okay all the time. Talking about those things, how can you cope with them in healthy ways?
Yes.
It's so important to that thriving, so it's critical.
And Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton, Dr. Calhoun has referenced the village paradigm in every aspect of the village. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts about what the community can do to help our youth take ownership of their health. I know you've been involved with this issue structurally, pragmatically, as well as politically in a variety of ways. But I just wondered, Reverend Perry, if you wanted to kind of talk about
Well,
that
first
aspect.
of all, Tom, I don't know if we're still in the village ideology anymore. The village used to be earlier when we had everybody at home, mom and dad in neighborhoods, taking care of everybody in the neighborhood. But I think that what Dr. Calhoun said was profound. You should smile at that, Dr. Calhoun. Profound, that she said that designing an infrastructure. And I think that is one of the things that I think we should collaborate with her on, which is designing an infrastructure which would give support to the parents, information to the teens who would be going into adulthood with references and support groups. References like what doctors you might be able to go to. What is the best way if you have pain? Do you go to the emergency room? Is there a Yale clinic that you might be able to go to that is already set up, waiting to handle you because they know how to handle this? So if we can develop that kind of infrastructure, pass it on, because it's not enough for us to have it. We have to get it out into the community through newsletters, through programs like yours. I think we can make a monumental difference in care. And I'm down for that. I'm up for that. I'm with that.
Let's get it.
You're on record. You're on record. Let's make it happen. Reverend Clayton?
There was something that Dr. Calhoun shared with us the other day that I thought was very important to the health of the person with sickle cell disease. And that was that pediatric care was working very well. But when they transitioned into the adult physician, there seemed to be a breakdown. And my thought was that if we could merge the two at some point, where the pediatrician and the regular physician could meet 12 years old or something, where the care and the trust would be built throughout the year, so there would not be a lapse when the person was ready to go off to college or go into adulthood.
Yes.
So I think that is a vital piece that we need to try to encourage. And I understand there's probably a financial piece with that in terms of insurances, et cetera, that need to be addressed.
Excellent. Dr. Calhoun, I see you're raising your hand, so please.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's a great idea. And I wanted to, it kind of got me excited because you asked me, why did you come here? I think this is part of the opportunity of being here at Yale, is this space for innovation, right? So as we think about how we are going to support our patients or parishioners, our community, how we're going to support them as they cross the transition divide. There's so many, it's not just me, there are people here who are really kind of interested in how to make this process better and interested in how we collaborate with doctors that are trained in both pediatrics and medicine, and maybe combining with a subspecialist. And so it's such a great time to be here, because there's lots of innovation happening, but everybody has the same goal of improving care, improving outcomes. And so I love Reverend Clayton's idea. And I wanted you to also know that there are other people here thinking about that too. And just that innovation, that collaboration, that how we talk about these things is wonderful. So
excellent. We have about 12 minutes. So the way it goes is Harry, the station manager, will play the music, and that means we've been kicked off. The deal is done. But but before that happens, Dr. Keller, we've referenced in a way parents and guardians, but again, they have a significant role. They have a role to play as well. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what can they do? If a parent or guardian or grandparent or uncle or brother or son is listening, and a family member for that matter, about 8 minutes to go, what can they do? What kind of role can they play in terms of increasing the healthy lifestyle?
So there's a few things, the thing about community is that I might see a patient for an hour once a month, maybe. But when they leave that space, it's my job in that 1 hour to give them the information they need to care for themselves. The rest of, it's 23 other hours in that day and, 6 other days in that week. And so I think that is the benefit of having like parents, guardians, siblings who are in these appointments and spaces with you, supporting you, that can also learn about sickle cell disease, so that you're not navigating this space alone. That is the importance of knowledge and awareness, like programs like this, right? So the people that are your loved ones can help support you, so that it's not all on you. And then, for my young adults, as they get older, it's almost it is raising them in this way, in the health literacy way, right? And giving them the space to care for themselves, and trusting them that they will take their medication, or that they know their body, enabling them and empowering them. And, it's one thing for me, your doctor, to say, I believe in you, you can do this. It's a totally different thing for your parent, your mom, your dad, your uncle, your auntie to say, you know what, you got this, you can do this, And so I think that is absolutely critical and important. So it's balancing, encouraging them, helping them go on their own. And it's not just like moms and dads, parenting and support looks different for every person. It may be that one teacher that, has always believed in you, and they know about sickle cell disease, and they're encouraging you and helping you and supporting you. So I think it just goes back to this concept of community. As our community becomes more knowledgeable, like, I don't have sickle cell disease, but I'm a part of this sickle cell disease community because I made that choice. And so it's the same thing with families and loved ones. And it also does a big amount in decreasing stigma, right? Nobody wants to be the one that's like, oh, she's sick or she can't do, that's not, and that's really, really not the case. But you need people around you that are continue to advocate for you, support you, believe in you in all those environments.
This might sound kind of self-evident, but when should individuals with sickle cell disease or the trait or reach out to the healthcare provider, such as yourself?
Oh, so if there is a person with sickle cell disease, they should be seeing a hematologist regularly. And part of that is to head off any complications that may be coming down the line. One of the things I talked about with the ambassadors the other day was the importance of screening. Like, there's certain screening tests that we do that are standard of care from birth to age 16. We do like an ultrasound of the head to look at your risk for stroke. And if anything looks funny before you have a stroke or anything, we can intervene and try to prevent that stroke, right? So that's a big deal. And you have to be seeing a hematologist regularly to make sure you get these screenings. And then, so these are planned visits, but like we talked about earlier, pain is one of the most common complications, and that's not planned, right? So of course, we want to be able to prepare for that and for them to be able to interact. I think in terms of people who have trait, or who, if they want to know that they have trait, we have to think about more broadly how we as Black people care for ourselves and our health and wellness, and how we incorporate our daily activities into regular care with a professional, right? And so if you're somebody that's generally healthy, you go to the doctor once a year, it's okay to say, hey, I'm not really sure about my sickle cell trait status. Can we send off some testing for that? Can we get some counseling about that? Or if you have sickle cell trait, it's likely you probably won't ever see a hematologist because you won't have any symptoms. So I think there is this bigger scope of how we care for ourselves in general, and then the importance of specialty care when you have a hematologic disorder like sickle cell.
We have about 3.5 minutes left. I want to give Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton a chance for some final remarks, and then Dr. Calhoun, I'd like you to kind of take us out with however the spirit might be moving you. Reverend Perry?
Yeah, I just simply like to say that on the Yale website, there are a number, I believe, of sickle cell studies that are going on that we can ask people to go to the website and sign up for. I think that's important in terms of helping us discover and taking charge of your health. And, while we focus on adolescents, it's really, it's a larger population. You got to be an adolescent first, I guess. But the whole for everyone. So the kind of information that we want to give is taking charge of your health and being responsible as a parent or as a child or whoever. And as we can help as ambassadors, and that's the program I'm thinking about when we talk about an infrastructural program, that we'll look at it in a general way, but starting from the particular and then moving to the general, and just get this information out so that people can have something to hang their hat on, or to a clothesline from which they can, gravitate to get an understanding. That's the thing. We just don't get the information out there. And maybe because we don't put the money or the resources behind that, but we've got to change that outlook and do better.
Indeed. Reverend Clayton?
Yes, I just want to take this time to thank you, Tom, and thank Dr. Calhoun for sharing with us today. It has really been a blessing and an eye-opener for so many. And I want to leave the rest of the time so that she can give us some more good information.
Dr. Calhoun, please share, and don't feel that we're being rude when the music comes. So I just want you to talk, do your soliloquy, and when you hear the music, you know that's the end.
Actually, I don't have a soliloquy. I'm thankful for this space and to you guys. I'm one person and I have information, and I'm thankful for the platform to share it here, but also for the gift of being able to care for people as they are at really, really challenging points of their lives. September is Sickle Cell Disease Awareness Month. I don't know if you guys knew that,
yes.
But I was like, is that why we're doing it? But I think it is an absolute gift and tremendous opportunity for us to be able to come together and support people with sickle cell disease who are our loved ones, truly.
Truly.
A cousin, a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, that could be anybody. So I think I join my colleagues here on this call and saying, it's important that we really are empowered to care for ourselves. And I just thank you for the space.
Well, I appreciate that. Then let me just, until Harry plays the music, Reverend Perry referenced the funding issue. Is it true that in your mind, the sickle cell NIH funding is insufficient?
So I think there's always room for growth and opportunity. Recently, in the past few years, the NIH has committed more money towards finding a cure for sickle cell. There's actually called a Cure Sickle Cell Initiative. And that hasn't always been the case. Also, the American Society of Hematology recently, in the past few years, has put more of a concerted effort towards sickle cell disease research. And then I think as we start talking more as a whole society about equity, we're seeing people kind of really shine a light on this disease and put money and stuff forward. Historically, that has not been the case. So that's why I'm excited about the direction we're headed in.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. It's really been a pleasure. See you soon, and let's just stay healthy and take ownership of our health.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm a roll with what
this is Harry Grove, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM in Haven.
Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down.